In this lecture, we're going to learn about relational operators in C++. And these are basically operators you use to compare stuff. Let's look at a piece of code here. We have two numbers. One is 45 and another is 60. They are stored in integer variables, number 1 and number 2. We can print them out and we're going to see them on the console or our terminal. And if we go down, we can really compare them. We can use the less than operator, less than or equal operator, greater than, greater or equal operator. We can check and see if two numbers are equal by using two equal signs here. Be careful about these two equal signs because if you use one, you're not going to be comparing numbers. You're going to be taking the thing on the right and assigning that to the thing on the left. So if you want to compare, you're going to have to type two equal signs. Another operator we can use to compare stuff is exclamation mark and equal, which is going to basically test if two numbers are equal, and we're going to get the result. One thing you should notice here is that we are wrapping our comparison expression into parentheses. That's because if we don't, we're going to get a weird compiler error that I am going to show you when we get in Visual Studio Code, but we don't have enough tools to really understand this error at this moment. So what we are going to do is avoid that problem by putting parentheses around our comparison expression here. We're going to go to Visual Studio Code and actually see this in action. Here we are in our working directory. We're going to grab the code from our template here, and we're going to put that in the current project, which is relational operators. We're going to go in and put in our code, and we are going to open this up in Visual Studio Code. We're going to get rid of things we don't need here. We are going to put in our code so that we can explore these things. We have two variables. In one we have a 45, in another we have a 60, and these are integers. The name for these variables are number 1 and number 2. We're going to print them out and we're going to see them on the console. Now we are going to compare them. One thing I haven't told you yet is that these comparison operators evaluate to booleans. In other words, they are going to return true or false. If you look down here, we want to know if number 1 is less than number 2. And the result of that is whether that's true or false. And this really makes sense. So because of that, we are using std bool alpha here to force stdcout to print this boolean value here as a true or false instead of a 1 or a 0, and we have seen this before. So if we try to build this and run this, let's bring up a terminal we can use, and we're going to run the task to build with GCC. If we go down here and run our rooster program, we're going to get our two numbers, 45 and 6. And we want to know if number 1 is less than number 2. And that's true. 45 is less than 60. So the result of this expression is going to be true. Now you know how to use this operator. One thing I want you to see is what could happen if you didn't use these parentheses around this expression here. Let's try this out. We're going to remove these parentheses and we're going to try and build. We're going to run the task to build with GCC, and we're going to get a really weird error because the compiler is going to try and evaluate this operator first. If we go back to our C++ operator precedence table and look at the operators we are trying to use in the stdcout statement, we're going to see that the operator to print things on the console has high precedence than our comparison operators here. So the precedence for our operator to print things to std out is 11, so it is higher. And the precedence for our comparison operators is 9 and 8. So the compiler is going to try and do this operator first. If we come back in Visual Studio Code, the compiler is going to try and think that you are printing number 1, but then again it's going to see this less than sign, and things are going to blow up. We don't really have enough tools to understand what is going on right now, but I just want you to see this error and show you a way to go around it and move on with your life by comparing stuff in your C++ programs. If you put parentheses around here, the problem is going to go away. Let's try and build again. We're going to build with GCC, and everything is going to go back to normal, and we're going to see our output if we run our rooster program here. This is how you can do this. Okay, now that we have a basic understanding of this, we can try the other operators, and it is going to be a walk in the park. We are going to go down here and put in our remaining operators. We can use less or equal operator to test and see if number 1 is less or equal to number 2. We can use the greater than operator to test and see if number 1 is greater than number 2. We can use the greater or equal operator. We can use the equal operator to test that number 1 is equal to number 2. And we can use this operator here, which is made up of the exclamation mark and an equal sign, to test and see if two numbers are not equal. And all these operators are going to evaluate to a Boolean, basically saying if what you are testing for is true or false. And we can print this out. And notice that we have these parentheses around to avoid the problem I just showed you a few minutes earlier. And if we run this, we're going to see the result. Let's build this with GCC as usual. We're going to run our program, and you're going to see that number 1 is less than number 2. This is true. Number 1 less or equal to number 2. This is also true. Number 1 greater than number 2. 45 is not greater than 60, so this is false. It's not greater than equal, so this is also false. Number 1 equals to number 2. This is going to be false. And the last statement that is going to test and see if number 1 is not equal to number 2 is going to evaluate to true, because number 1 is not equal to number 2. If this is not making sense yet, please go through it a couple of times. And if you have a problem, please do ask me. I will do the best I can to help you out. Another thing I want you to see before I let you go is that you can store the result of these operators into a variable and use that later in your program. For example, here we can take our expression to compare number 1 and number 2. The result of that is going to be stored in this bool variable, and we can print it out later like this. If we run this, we're going to build with GCC, and we're going to run the program. We're going to see that 45 equals to 60 is false. And it is coming from this statement here. You can try and change these numbers. For example, change this to a 20 and see the results that we get. And you can try and run these in your mind and see that they really make sense. If we run rooster now, we're going to get different results because we are now comparing 45 and 20. And here at the last statement, you see that they are not equal. If we put in two equal numbers, we're going to get a true there. Let's try this out. We're going to run the task to build with GCC. And if we clear so that we get rid of all this noise and run rooster, we're going to get 20 is equal to 20, and this is true. This is really all we set out to do in this lecture. I hope you have a better idea of these relational operators in C++. We're going to stop here in this lecture. In the next lecture, we're going to learn about logical operators in C++. Go ahead and finish up here and meet me there.